It's time for Geocache Talk. Whether you are at work, in the car, or wherever you are, we hope you enjoy this show about the great sport of geocaching. If you're watching live on YouTube, you can be part of the adventure tonight in the chat room and participate with others as they watch the show. If you are listening later, please give it a like and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app so that you can get all of the weekly Geocache Talk goodness. If you have not become a patron of the Geocache Talk Network, what are you waiting for? Patron levels start as low as a Bison Tube level at $3 a month. To sign up is easy. Simply go to the Geocache Talk website and click on the Become a Patron button, or go to patreon.com/Geocache Talk. Patrons now get the famous Blackout coin, invites to special events, and other really great items throughout the year. Become a patron today. Have you subscribed to FTF Magazine yet? FTF Magazine is the #1 geocaching magazine available. It is a quarterly magazine that you can be part of. Submit your geocaching milestones and adventures to be published. FTF Magazine is also interactive with puzzles to solve and the hunt to find Spartacus. If you can solve the puzzle or find Spartacus, then you will be entered in to win a special pack tag. Every new subscription, you will receive a special swag pack. Subscribing is easy. Just visit FTF's website, ftfgeo.com. Don't miss out and subscribe today.
And sponsored by smashingpennies.net. Get 10% off your order with code Geocache Talk Network. They are perfect to put in a geocache. Big thanks to Derek of Baker 6 Clan for the graphics and our featured patrons, Electric Water Boy. Wow, he's in the chat room tonight. You can talk to him. Aggie Jedi Master, Antaeus, Joshua, the geocaching vlogger, Nick at Cashly, One Kind Word, Butterfly Girl, Loon Trackers, the Aussie Geocacher, Terrell 2, and our new patrons, Happy F33T3, TN Duke, returning patron Ravenclaw Tia, Baby Yoda Girl, BNJ Bish, and returning patron Husker Medic. Hey, I got through that, Jesse, without...
You did. You probably didn't butcher anybody's name, I don't think.
I've done them a while, so I think we're okay. Well, welcome. We got a co-host from another show who's just part of the team, so he's always welcome. Pathfinder 33. Charles, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a while since I've been on the POS.
That's right.
Show.
The POSS, the plain old
Sunday show. That's right.
But it's great to have you. Yeah, got you out of the puzzle jail for a little while. So
puzzle jail.
Well, because he's always on Puzzle Talk. So
yeah, I got it. I can figure out that puzzle. That's all right.
You can figure that out. It's not too hard of a puzzle.
I've done a puzzle before myself.
That's not a puzzle you want to work on, right? So let's do some news, and I don't know if you want to do something. I'll put you on the spot, Jesse, but let's do some news. So we are 48 days. I'll get the actual.
Way to be prepared, Gary.
Shows me how prepared I am. We're about 6 weeks approximately from Podcast of Hope. That's December 2nd. Make sure you mark on your calendars. Podcast of Hope at our 8th year, and very excited about this year's lineup. We'll do the Cavalcade of Stars show at some point in a couple of weeks. Very excited. Already sending out some emails, getting things lined up, but looking forward to raising more money for St. Jude. Very excited about doing that and helping out. So one thing I do every year, and I tell you guys about, is that they give us a link to the brand.stjude. Whatever. So we have a special login to. It's a cool website that they've created. It's for people to use their branded material, which makes sense. They
Mm-hmm.
don't really want you making up stuff. They want you to use their stuff, which is
Right.
great. And they give you access to it. So we're thrilled to do that, to use whatever they want us to. But I was going through yesterday and trying to find some other videos, because we like to do the little short verbage type videos during the show.
Mhm.
Different stories that they give us. They're 2 or 3 minutes long. They're really cool. And dang it, Jesse, again, I got to get out the Kleenex, and watching these videos. It's like, as I've told him before, it's like I have to watch them like 10 or 20 times, so that when I get to Podcast of Hope, I've seen it enough that I'm kind of like can keep
Right.
it together. You know
Take
what I
the
mean?
shock factor out.
Well, just so I can get through it without becoming a blubbering mess. So there's some good videos for this year that I've included or started to include. So anyway, so there's that. I know you guys just kind of wrapped up some mega weeks. Charles was in Daytona Beach wearing the shirt. He's representing tonight. There you go.
It's a
Geocoin
very
Fest.
cool shirt. They did a good job with that shirt.
Yeah, I really like the kind of retro, the colored collars and cuffs on the sleeves. I know that we had I was a part of the planning committee for that mega event, and we had a lot of discussions about it. But the t-shirts were a hit. A lot of people really liked them.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be we had one person, Lissa, who's Ryan's wife. She had on kind of the three quarter sleeve baseball shirt, and a lot of the especially the ladies that attended the event were like, how do I get one of those? So
right,
if
big hit.
just FYI, if you're planning on hosting a big event and have shirts for it, these with the colored collars and cuffs on them, or those like baseball 3/4 sleeve V-neck shirts for the ladies, or
I like Jesse's wearing.
Yeah, man, those were a hit. They really were. So yeah, good job on whoever the discussion for that. But Geocoin Fest was a good event. So
very cool. It looked like it was as we would all suspect, that the team, and you were part of that team, did a great job of planning, going through and getting extra events, because that's the other thing too, is with you and with D and David and the different members of the team, they really, and this is what I've always talked about, I won't go in too much detail, but just the fact that you can go to any mega, but if you go to a mega that's done by like you and Team D&D and some of the Cache Fest folks, you're going to get a fuller experience, I feel, because yes, the mega is going to be unbelievable, but the Friday, the Thursday, the Wednesday are so packed and so quality that
it's really a week. It really is.
And to be honest, I think it blows away a lot of the standard megas to an extent. I mean, some of them will do it, but I think I think we take, our teams take pride in giving people that extra. There are these extra things we do, kind of like we did with the with the paddle wheel, doing the Adventure Lab on the paddle wheel, or we did the Adventure Lab at the art museum in one year. And so there's, y'all did the Daytona Daytona 500.
The International Speedway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, if you're using that as one of your vacations, and a lot of people do, right, to go to megas, then you need to throw some other, let me change that. I'm not telling people how they need to do their megas, right? It's beneficial for a lot of people that are traveling to have more things to do than just the one day. Yeah. And I think it's beneficial to be able to get around town, showcase the town. And if you're using that as like a 3 or 4 day vacation, you want extra things to do if you choose to do them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so interesting topic, and I definitely want Charles on for this, and obviously Jesse. But we're going to talk about, and I think
no,
that way, these two guys. But I think something though is, and some people mentioned this week, they're like, "Well, I don't live near the desert mountain, so why do I want to listen?" And I think everyone's going to learn. I think everybody's going to learn it because some of the things that they're going to talk about tonight really do apply really anywhere. They aren't always just desert or mountain specific.
And you're still probably going to visit those places, even if you don't live there. You're still going to visit them and find caches. So
sure, and you kind of want to know.
We would at least hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it helps to know what some of the steps are that the cache owners are going through to kind of help you as well, because I think that kind of gives you an idea of, okay, they had to go through this, therefore I got a better idea of kind of what I'm getting into when I'm trying to find one. So show notes, I've got some of the wiki pages. We won't really get into those much tonight, but I did want to at least put them in the notes so you have them as a reference point. So GLA Mountain Goat. Yep. You got to sometimes be.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be. So you guys both have a lot of experience hiding caches and finding caches in the desert and in the mountains. So where do you guys want to start? Do you want to start with sort of desert caches? You want to start there?
Yeah. I think one way to start, and I think Charles would be good to start on this with desert, especially because we've both been in the mountains a lot. He's been in the desert a lot more than me. So if we start with desert, it's a good idea. But I think one thing to think about for like people that don't live there or that travel and cache, or they're going to travel and do it. Like, I'm not even living in that environment anymore. I'm living in a totally different environment now.
Yeah.
And like when I first got to this environment, it brought up a good point that like you see this in different areas. I get here and it says typical Florida style cache. Well, I just got here, and I'm like, dude, I don't live here. I don't know what that means. But caches, and ultimately it means, flat pack stuff down in a palm tree.
Yeah.
But if you don't know the region, you don't know what to expect in a lot of caches. And I know one thing, and we'll circle back around to it, but like in Colorado, like in Florida, a 5 terrain cache is one of two things: a kayaking cache.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're lying. So there's not a lot of options, right? There's not a lot of other things to make it a 5. But
tree climb,
Colorado, the tree climb ain't no 5. Anyway.
Well, I'm just saying they're going to label it.
It is possible. There's some tall trees here, but in Colorado, and he'll talk about some of his caches out there too. But a 5 terrain really means a 5 terrain. It doesn't just mean climbing up a mountain, because that may not be. You might not need special equipment for it.
True.
It's a 5 terrain in Colorado or in Utah or whatever. Is probably, I don't want to make fun of places like Texas because that's dangerous, but your 5 terrains you're lying about too. So it's different, right? Like you can't expect the same thing. So when you
Texas
get out
is pretty big though. I mean, you've got some mountains. There's some mountains out.
Some of those bushes are pretty
Texas.
big in Texas. I agree with you.
Oh, you're funny.
You have to reach.
Be careful, Charles. Charles,
but
be careful. Charles will back me up. He's part Texan, so he'd back me up.
I know. I said it's not good to make fun of Texans because they get all crying about it. But I mean, I'm just kidding. Next, I'm just gonna go ahead and get myself assassinated. I'll make fun of Buc-ee's too. Why don't I just do that at the same time?
Go for it. Why don't you take on Whataburger too? No, Whataburger, HEB.
That sucks. Come on now.
Take all those.
Whataburger.
Buc-ee's.
Those are animals or people. Anyway,
it's dangerous. He's walking the line.
No, the point behind all that was we're talking about different regions tonight, and even with the mountains, even though they overlap a lot, mountains and deserts overlap in that area a lot. Regionally, not only your hides, but what you should be looking for is very different than like a Texas or a Florida. And I've hidden more in the desert. I mean, I've found more in the desert than I've hidden. So I'm really curious what I would like to start off with Charles doing the desert part, and then we kind of move up to the mountains from there.
What is it? What is a T5 out in the middle of the desert in Arizona Charles? What do you think? Is it what would that be?
Did your horse have a name?
Exactly.
Yeah. Really, unless you're talking about something that's going to be like a significant hike to get to it.
Right.
We do have hikes in the desert. There are mountains in the desert, believe it or not. There are mountains with no trees, because I have a geocache out in the greater Phoenix area that's on top of a mountain in the desert.
Right.
But
Kitt Peak is tall because
historically, generally speaking, it's going to have to be a walk, a pretty significant walk, because for whatever reason the land is closed, and you can't drive a vehicle. There are lots of power trails down power line roads and whatnot, but if you really want to get a terrain 5 in the desert, you're going to have to walk a significant amount in the desert in order for me to really, consider it a terrain 5, unless you're in some of those areas where, hey, there are, it's a significant hike and it's up a mountain in the desert, right? But typically, otherwise, you're going to be hard pressed to get a terrain 5, or at least get me on board with a lot of terrain 5s in the desert,
right?
Unless it involves one of those two things, right? A significant hike, or a significant hike and mountains involved. Because there are 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 foot mountains sat between Phoenix and the Mexico border, right? And so there are mountains in the desert, and there are no trees. There are a lot of saguaro cactus, but there's no trees to speak of. So you can have mountains and desert in the same landscape, and if you combine those two, given with a long hike, then you may be able to justify a terrain 5, but you'll probably be hard pressed to do that, in my opinion.
Sure.
Now, would you say that people would tend to skew towards that because the terrain is so extreme compared to what people are used to? They skew towards that 5 because, like, it's in the desert. You got to bring water, which you should always bring water. But just for the remoteness of it, do you think people tend to show people that it's a dangerous area? I think that's why people tend to bump it up to a 5 a lot of times.
Yeah,
legitimate. I don't mean like fake.
Well, and I'll tell you, for the permanent residents to like Arizona, because I lived there for 3 years, so short amount of time, but enough to kind of get a feel for things. The permanent residents that live there, they're just like permanent residents in Colorado. They're like, well, yeah, it's in the mountains. You kind of, there's no real complaining about this. They kind of are the same way. For the snowbirds that come down, who are used to living in, Michigan, Minnesota, Ontario, Indiana, and come down to the desert, and they're like, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah. It's a culture is really different, but for those that really live there, if you find somebody who's a permanent resident to Arizona, or to like where I live here in Southern Utah, and you find somebody who has a terrain 5 cache that's a permanent resident for the terrain, then
prepare accordingly.
Just know that they didn't give it a terrain 5, just to give it the terrain 5, right? Like, I've found some caches that involved, like the Arizona County Challenge, and I don't think it's a terrain 5. It's a difficulty 5, but I don't think it's a terrain 5, because in reality, the walk from the parking area to the Arizona County Challenge, to the oldest one there are a couple Arizona blackout challenges, but it was like a mile hike, and most of it was on a paved road. Past there was a no parking beyond this spot, so we parked there and then walked up the hill, and then there was a trailhead, and you got on a trail, and the cache was 50 yards off of the trail, and so really,
that's a terrain too.
No special equipment.
Right.
That's not it's not a 2 in Texas, but it's probably a 2 out
according
there.
to the rules. Now, if we want to be purist about the rules, most of the caches that are out there that are marked as a 5 are actually a 4.5.
Yes, because we talked about Go ahead.
Yeah. On that same thing that Jesse was talking about needing a kayak. Hey, water is precious in the desert, and we dam it up and store it.
Right.
And so you will find, and it kind of surprised me when I first moved to Phoenix, because we sold our kayaks in Colorado, and I was like, "No, we're going to Phoenix. There's no water there. It's the desert." And then I got there and I was like, "Oh, we got a lake like 20 minutes outside of town."
Could have kept the kayaks.
And Laura was like, "We could have kept the kayaks."
Mm-hmm.
So there are lakes, there are dammed up rivers, there are places for you to put kayak caches, and there are these really gnarly, tops of these desert peaks that have been flooded. So you'll get this just crazy gnarly rock sticking up out of the lake. So outside of that though, you're going to be hard pressed to get a terrain 5 in the desert, because you can pretty much walk to it. Right.
So let's back up a moment. So I moved to Arizona. King Tut. I'm just kidding. I moved to Arizona, and I'm gonna want to go hide a cache. What are some of the things I need to know before just driving down a road and traipsing off a little trail and just dropping my ammo can? When you think about Arizona, and I know each state is different, and that's part of what we're talking about tonight, is you kind of need to know, but in a general sense, when you're in whether it be Nevada or wherever, there's parts of California that are desert, there's several parts of the country that have, if we're talking about US, I mean, hopefully this will translate to wherever you are in the world if there's desert nearby. What are some things, Charles, that people need to do to properly place a cache in the desert? And like I said, we'll get to mountains later, but let's just start with desert.
All right. So you kind of got to look at the terrain for 365 days a year. Right. And I know that and we'll talk about this in the mountains because it's kind of more prominent, but for anybody who saw videos of earlier this summer, when there was when the rooftop pool in Vegas dropped into the casino, and the strip was flooded and water coming in the front door of these casinos, like, it rains in the desert.
Right.
Contrary to popular belief, like, it does rain. And when it rains, especially during monsoon season, it is a lot of water in a short amount of time. And what looks like a dried up riverbed all of a sudden becomes a raging river in a matter of moments. Right. It can happen. So in that, you need to look at the terrain for where you're hiding a cache and say, all right, in monsoon season, is this going to fill up with water?
Mm-hmm. Or wash away?
Right. And so that's the thing. Like, all right, a lot of people here in Phoenix, in Arizona, a majority of the caches that you're going to find aren't on the ground. In the desert here, they do not put for the most part, they do not put an ammo can on the ground with a pile of rocks on top of it.
Gotcha.
Because that ammo can is going to wash away. If they do put an ammo can on the ground with a pile of rocks, it is typically going to be tethered to a tree nearby. Most of the caches that we'll find in and around the area were preforms or pill bottles that were wire tied to a bush, a tree, some type of cactus. They typically weren't just on the ground with a pile of rocks on top of them, because during monsoon season, when you have flash floods, all of that stuff goes away. Rocks, everything gets, I mean, you're talking about the violent rushing of water that can move boulders the size of small houses, right? Like it'll pick up cars and just, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, like it will wash your car and you will find it miles later down, you know. And so your geocaches are the same way. Most of them are going to be tethered to some type of, tree, cactus, poles that are out there, some type of fencing, something like that. And most of them that I found typically, if they're down in the lowland area, are not going to be, on the ground covered with a pile of rocks. They're going to be, magnetic caches on, poles, the telephone power line poles. There's a good portion of them in Arizona that have been replaced with metal poles, because the wood poles will rot in the desert heat. And then there's all kinds of stuff that goes into that. But there'll be magnets, magnetized to a metal pole, but they're typically not just laying on the ground with a couple of rocks on top of them, like how I like to hide my mountain hides.
Which we'll get to that. Yes. So Electric Water Boy brought up a point to know about, and this kind of covers some of the southwest, I guess, in a sense. Pill bottles survive the desert heat, cold, and the UV. He's asking, so they don't survive.
Now, if you're looking at your typical yellow pill bottle that you get from the pharmacy when you pick up pills,
prescription.
Those prescription pill bottles, they're horrible. The plastic doesn't survive the heat. I can't tell you how many that were wrapped in duct tape that, as you twist the lid off, the whole top
falls apart.
Yeah. And then really the only thing holding it together is now, I will tell you that if you, some of the heavier duty white plastic pill bottles, that you'll get garlic pills or whatnot in at your local pharmacy, those last really well. It's a different type of plastic, obviously. Preforms. Soda preforms, those last phenomenally. You know the down part to soda preforms in the desert?
What's that?
The lid. The cap.
Yeah, the cap. Yeah.
The cap is garbage. So, funny enough, the local reviewer that's there in the greater Phoenix area out in Apache Junction that I became really good friends with, he has these metal lids that he got that fit the soda preform bottles.
Very cool.
So all of his preforms that you'll find have this metal, a white metal lid for it. And he got them, gave us the link to where he got them from off of Amazon, but is a really great option because, it's not going to rust shut. Though you'll get some tarnish and rust on the lids, it's not like having two pieces of metal that will rust together. I can't tell you the amount of cookie tins, Christmas cookie tins that I've come across that you just, I mean, you're sitting there with a screwdriver.
Altoids.
Altoid tins.
Those are little razor blades once they get all rusted up.
Yeah. So, it's things like that, right? Think about where the environment you're in, and you got to think about that environment 365 days because it's not always dry in the desert.
Well, right. And depending on what you're trying to put out, it may not be an issue, but I do remember the geostash that you found. I don't know if you still have the container, but when you found it, tell people what it looked like, because people forget.
In fact, I do have it. It's in my spare bedroom. I found it yesterday. We were going through trying to figure out something to do with this wall back here.
Yeah.
And we've got a plan to get some stuff on the wall, kind of like
that's cool.
You've got in the background. But it was this very light shade of like translucent pink,
right?
Except on the one side.
Right.
Yeah.
On the one side, it is because it was up against a tree branch. It was zip tied up into a tree.
Yep.
The one side that was up against the tree, super dark red. But because it had been exposed to sunlight for so long, day after day, repeatedly, by the time I found it, it was this really ghostly, translucent kind of pink color. That red anodized, and we all know, those bison tubes come in
deep
that
red,
really deep red. Nah.
So
there's one little sliver of it on the one side.
Yeah. So that's something that you have to recall. You have to remember, and this sort of, I guess, applies really to all of your containers. The fact that, yes, your points about the water is very important, but also the sun is going to beat down seriously. And if you, now in that case, it didn't really matter, but let's say that you did that, the color of your container matters for the final, stage. It's a stage of your puzzle, and people have to go find your stage one, and it has to be, red. And when they get to it, it's like, they don't know what color it is, because it's been washed out by the UV. You're like, well, I can't complete this. So you just have to know that your containers have got to hold up, and B, UV is going to destroy. And if you had something written on it, well, screw it. I mean, it's gone.
Yeah. That's where you something written on it, or UV light, or anything else. You got to know that the environment can change your cache pretty quickly.
Yeah. And the other thing to that is like the O-rings. So you've got some lock and locks that have a pliable O-ring. Bison tubes have a O-ring that is exposed on the outer rim. So if you got anything that's going to be exposed to direct sunlight that is like that, it's going to deteriorate pretty quickly. Ammo cans get away with it because their rubber seal is up on the inside and it never comes into direct contact. But I've found plenty of ammo can lids out on military bases that were separated from the ammo can.
Right.
And that rubber gasket that's in the top has deteriorated and is very brittle. So it's not designed to come into contact with UV. That's why the ammo can's designed the way that it is. Just keep that in mind, right? Anything that is not designed to be exposed to UV light, the desert will beat it pretty good.
In the desert, and I know we're going to get into the mountains in just a minute. It's going to be the opposite of this, but if you're going to hide out in the desert right now, what kind of area would you look at? Like, would you try to find something more elevated because of floods? What areas would you avoid, and like physical, structures out in the area, near a cactus, near a stream bed, what would you try? What do you think is a good place and a bad place? Because, like you said, they're going to wash away and stuff.
So I'll look for the wadis, for the intermittent stream beds. If you're looking around and you can see where it looks like, hey, I'm kind of in a low spot here, that's probably going to fill up anytime that there's rain there. And so I've only got two hides in Arizona. Neither one of them's on the ground and one of them's not. So but I'll look at that and say, all right, I take into consideration rainfall. All right, rain's going to come. Is it going to affect where I'm at? if I place it on the ground? If the answer to that is yes, then I have to do something else to do that. So I have an ammo can on the ground is one of my hides, and the other one is the bonus cache to an adventure lab that is a bison tube that is hung on a wire inside a pole. So I look for stuff like that, and if it looks like there may be a possibility that it could wash away, then I try to find an elevated spot to hang it from, and that's pretty typical. People will hang them in Palo Verde trees. People will hang them in. We've got some little scrub bushes out there that people like to hide them in. So it all just kind of depends. But by far and large, some of the geo arts and the big power runs that you'll find will all be like preforms that are hung in a tree, and whatnot. So
right, makes sense.
Those preforms really are good. Good containers and pretty cheap.
Yeah, and in their condensed version, the plastic's pretty thick. And so it's in that, right? So it's a huge difference between the preform in its condensed version versus a gallon milk jug in its blown up version, right? So the plastic, depending on how thick it is, will dictate how long it weathers and whatnot. So looks like
for me, I've rarely seen one of those broken.
So
now the top could mess up, but I've never seen one of those broken. The preforms. Right. It's usually the failure point is usually how they attach it to whatever they're attaching it to. That's usually where the failure point is.
So just in case people are like, what the heck is it? What the heck's a preform? I'll show you real quick. So if they put this into a machine, it can become a soda bottle, but right now it is really thick. If I get something to smack it with, you can kind of hear. It's a very, very thick plastic. And what Charles was saying earlier is, right, Charles, this is the weak point.
Yeah, at least for the ones that I found in the desert, that cap right there is that's going to be there for 6 months, and then it's either birds are going to peck at it because it's colorful and they're wanting to, because birds are curious animals, they're going to pick at it and it's some of that softer plastic is, especially if you get some of this from China, they're starting to be a soy-based plastic so that they'll biodegrade or can be recycled a little easier. And believe it or not, raccoons can smell that. Chipmunks and squirrels can smell that, and they'll come after it and start to chew on it. So, so if
good, this part not so good.
Right. So if you're going to go that route and you live someplace like that, the metal lids are the way to go.
Yeah. So definitely, you can find.
We need to get
measure that and find lid. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
I was gonna say the same thing you are. We need to find that link and we'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, we'll have to find. We'll measure and figure out, because that's really plastic ammo cans. Probably. Well, Charles says no.
No.
Yeah, let's bring the $3 extra and go and get the metal one.
Absolutely, it's worth, if you're gonna place an ammo can out in the. I've come across plenty where the black plastic latch, because it has a little metal hoop on it, that metal has gotten hot enough that it has melted the plastic that it's cinching tight. So, I mean, you figure that, if you're looking at it's 120, up to 130 degrees in the summertime, when I lived in Phoenix, we had like 30 days in a row where the overnight low was a triple digit number.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so
that's big time.
There you have it, so in that, just know that, right? The people who have lived long-term in the desert understand some of that stuff. And it's like Owen from KC just said right here, right? So any thin plastic's going to become brittle within a year. If you've got any of those little, and I've seen a lot of the like smaller, like Glad sandwich containers, or a lot of people will think that they're, oh, well, I hide this in North Carolina, it's not an issue, but that your Kirkland or your Sam's Club, like giant plastic jug that holds 3 pounds of peanuts, or your Bridge Mix or whatnot,
won't make it.
They're gonna be so brittle that they're gonna start to fall apart within a year. Within a year, easily.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about the mountains. Let's switch gears and talk about hiding, because there's some things about hiding in the mountains. It fascinates me. I've not lived in an area that, and both you guys have. What are some things that come to mind initially? And I've got some other questions, but what are some things that come to mind when you think mountain cache?
Well, one thing that we haven't talked about, which we could have talked about during the desert, but we didn't bring it up yet, but in the mountains, depending on tree cover and where you're at, hiding the cache and getting good coordinates are going to be one of your big struggles in the mountains. You may be where you're not getting good service. You're in between two valleys, or you're in between, or even in a canyon area. There's areas where it's hard to get good service. It's not going to be perfect. It's way better than it was 20 years ago, but it's not going to be perfect by any means. So when you're hiding in the city, it's easy to get coordinates. You can Google map it, right? But one thing, when you get in those really remote areas, I don't know what it's like in the desert, because there's no cover. So, and unless you're in the mountains and the desert, but in the mountains, cell signal can bounce a little bit, and that can really throw you off way more than in the city.
Elevation matters.
Yeah. Elevation matters a lot.
Elevation matters. Like when you're sitting there looking at this dot on the map, and your GPS can fluctuate 15 to 20 feet, and that 15 to 20 feet involves 1,000-foot drop.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Right?
Which way to go too on a hike? If you're thinking multi-stage.
Oh yeah.
If it's 100 feet over, you may have to go 8 miles around to get to that 100 feet over. It can make a huge difference, and not that you shouldn't do it, but you should. Just know that that's a serious consideration in the mountains. GPS, the coordinates.
That's part of it too. I think that for us that are sort of used to the hiding, in town, I can usually look on a Google map and confirm, oh, okay, here's the tree. It's obvious. But like you said, you can't really, you got to know before you leave, because it's harder to try to determine what was I looking at, or where exactly was I, because it all starts to look similar on the side of a mountain, because was I on this part of the mountain, or was I on this side, or
all right, so I'm going to share this picture. This is one of my hides. This is in Colorado. Cool. Right? And so you can see the ammo can down here in the bottom corner, and that ammo can lives in that crack between those, right? And the flat rock that's over on the other side of that crack sits on top of that ammo can, right? So that ammo can's not going anywhere. But if you wanted to try to verify these coordinates from Google Earth, look at the rocks all around it and all of the numerous cracks that are in there,
right?
And try to imagine looking straight down at it, because that's what Google Earth is going to do.
Yeah.
So in cases like that, I would give you a more of a descriptive hint, because obviously if you've hiked that far to get there, I want you to find it, right? And so I'll do just like Owen from KC. I'll give you a descriptive hint that says you're looking for this. It is going to be, that it's an ammo can in a giant crack between two boulders with a flat rock on top of it that is going to be, and I'll give you some description of what you're standing and looking at. So you should be able to pretty closely find what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
For some of my caches. But, that's one of them. And I know that it was Burnt Turtles had said something about this on the Facebook page. He's like, oh, yeah, the hint is under a rock, literally on a mountain that's covered in rocks. And be like, absolutely, that's my hint is it's under a rock. But I give you more than that. But that's one of the things, right? Like, you're trying to look at this from a bird's eye view down on it to confirm coordinates. And Jesse's right. Like, when I go and hide remote mountain caches, I normally take 2 GPSs plus my iPhone with me.
Right.
I will set one GPS on, 6 inches from the hide one way, put the other GPS, and I'll just leave them there while I'm doing whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. Let them average out.
And then I will do just like just here, right?
Yep.
I will do coordinates from Cachely, right?
Yeah.
And then I have a second app on my phone that does the same thing. It averages your waypoint for where your phone's location is. So what I'll do is average Cachely, take a screenshot of it. I'll average the 2 GPSs. I'll take a picture of those with my phone, and then I'll set my phone down and open up the other app and let it run through its minute and a half, 2 minutes of averaging waypoints, and then I'll take a screenshot of it as best I can without moving it I'll get back, look at all 4 sets of coordinates, and if they're within a meter of each other,
close enough. Yeah.
My hint that I give you is going to be good enough that as long as you get to that spot, you're going to be able to find it. I don't make, outside of the camouflage that I have on that geocache to make it blend in so that other people who are up there don't stumble upon it. Outside of that, because they're crazy people in Colorado that like to bag 14 and 13,000 foot peaks for some reason.
Right. Well,
so they go there. They go there for fun, not looking for anything more than to say I was here. At least geocachers are looking for something.
Right.
Now, in fairness, those peak baggers that you're making fun of, they are looking for something just like we are.
They are. And on a lot of those.
No, there's a summit log up there that they go and sign. Yes. It gets confused for the geocache a lot.
So, and it is like that in Texas. So on top of Guadalupe Peak in Texas, there's a virtual cache there.
Yep.
There's also an ammo can up there on top of the mountain because I've been there. And I can't tell you the number of geocachers you flip through the book and you're like, I hope they realize that there's a virtual, like this is, and they're like, but they sign the summit log that's in the ammo can, and
happens all the time.
Happens all the time. And that's the other thing that I'm cognizant about is so my remote mountain hides in Colorado and Wyoming that I have, I make sure that they're nowhere near where the summit log says that it's posted.
Could be right. So Strek 2 said earlier, I want to get you guys' opinion on this. He said maybe you should find at least 100 caches in an area before putting one out. So absolutely. Do you believe that's true for any area, or do you think it's
actually yes, for any area?
Okay.
But more important, so if you move to Wichita, Kansas next week, you're sitting in the middle of the city, you want to hide a cache, you don't need to find 100. It's very similar. You need to check the area. But if you're moving to somewhere that has a terrain that's dangerous to people, like mountains and desert, you need to be sure you know what's going on. You don't.
Yeah.
It's different. It is different. You have somebody hike 5 miles out in the desert dangerously anyway, and then you've hit a container that won't last 3 days. You've wasted everybody's time. Nobody wants that. You give people a bad experience.
Well, and I'll tell you, recently we went to 2 mega events. So I went to GeoCoin Fest and to go and caching the following weekend, and made a 11-day hoorah trip out of it. While I was in Florida, we drove all the way out to Key West, but I stopped at this cache because somebody told me, said, "Hey, so you're going to drive right past Florida's oldest cache on your way." And he was like, "Hey, you need to stop and grab that." So we're driving through Florida, me and my wife, and we're like, "Hey, so
Christmas Cache, I think it's called.
It is Christmas Cache.
Christmas Cache.
We stopped at a Walmart and got some knee-high rubber boots. And we're like, if we never need them, we can stop off and drop them off at a Walmart before we fly home. I used those rubber boots one time. It was a great $29 investment because the first 300 feet of Christmas Cache was shin deep water.
Oh, dang.
The last 750 feet was shin deep water.
Dang.
Right. And not to mention the 6 foot long Eastern Diamondback that we found in between those two flooded wet sections.
Crud.
So
I can't believe you were in that water, Charles. That I told you the story before you went down there. That I went down there and saw a 28-foot alligator across the path that had like mountains growing out of the back of it, and and you went in that water right after I told you that story.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What is wrong with you, man?
Well, so it's funny because we're walking through there and we get past it, and it says there's a sign that says, don't go in the water that they're alligators, right? And so we're like, oh yeah,
Yes.
So we're walking through this like shin deep water, and my wife's like, she's
smart.
Yeah, because she's behind me. She's like, but she was worried about the snake because we came across a huge rattlesnake, and I was like, well, the water's a good thing because none of the venomous snakes really like hanging out in water. They'll go through it, but they don't. It's not like water moccasins that just live in the water, right?
Yeah,
like, rattlesnakes don't like to hang out in the water.
Yeah,
but the last 700 feet, shin deep water, and she was a good 15, 20 feet behind me, but make sure that I scared away but we came across alligators on our caching run out there. Definitely, I would say that if I moved from where I'm living currently to Florida, I need to do a lot of caching before I hide one, because the terrain is just so foreign and different than what I'm used to and what I know.
Right.
And I'll tell you that I did some really obscene things to some palm trees before I really realized what a Florida style hide was. It took me, it's some pretty obscene things to some trees before I realized, it's this.
You violated some of those, because if people don't know, what they'll do is they'll take the palm trees and they'll cut, and then the cuts though make perfect little spots to put caches down in. Of course, other things can live down in there too, so be careful.
Yeah.
So we really have time tonight to talk. You work for the Bureau of Land Management, and something that I noticed earlier when I was getting some of the notes ready tonight, which was BLM. What do you want to call it? BLM areas that are managed by the Bureau of Land Management. That I didn't realize. I thought they were going to be under one overarching government, I know. But tell people a little bit about, if they do some investigating and they find out that this particular area that they're interested in their state is BLM, what they don't have to assume that it's off limits, right? They should check.
Yeah. So any public land management agency, right? And this will this is going to be a broad, overreaching statement that will probably somebody will come back and be like, "Oh, that's not right." In Maine,
yeah,
oh, man, okay, but Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. National Forest Service, they are all, even though all of the BLM is the BLM is managed by states. And so you may have BLM Arizona, BLM Utah, BLM Colorado, right? And the rules for BLM Colorado may not be the same as the rules for BLM Arizona.
Okay.
And even within BLM Arizona, there is a Gila district, there's a Colorado River district, there's an Arizona Strip district, and each one of those districts then get to make their own rules on how they manage the land that they manage. The same with the National Forest Service, right? You may have a national forest that covers 3 states or a portion of 3 states. And you may have 2 national forests that share a common boundary, but one forest over here says these are the rules, and this one over here says these are the rules, and they may not all be the same. So, and they may not align with geocaching.com's policies, right? So,
gotcha.
we all know that a minimum distance between caches is
520
feet,
a tenth of a mile, right? 528 feet. The Chattahoochee National Forest, right, in Georgia says that the minimum distance between caches inside the Chattahoochee National Forest is 1/2 mile.
Oh.
So
that's good to know.
They have their own saturation.
They have their own saturation limits. Whereas the San Juan National Forest in Colorado says we are only going to allow 50 active geocaches in the national forest. So if you want to hide a cache in the San Juan National Forest, if there are 49 active geocaches in the forest, you're allowed to hide 1. But if there are already 50, you have to wait for one to get archived before you can place a new one. The reviewer in Colorado is very on top of that. He understands the sensitivity that they have for their area.
It's their rules. Yeah.
It's their rules as the land managers, right? And in that, know that every portion of public land, be it something that is managed by the Bureau of Reclamation, the Bureau of Land Management, the
state
the state, they have to have some type of land use plan, right?
Right.
The Forest Service calls it a forest plan. The BLM has another name for it, but it's all pretty much the same overarching, this is our land management policy.
Right.
And if it is not in that land management policy that it is forbidden, then it is allowed by default.
Not the opposite.
Right. Because we didn't specifically say you can't do it, then you're allowed to do it by default. It is only those things that are specifically outlined as being off limits or prohibited or in limited quantities or at minimum distances, right? And all of that stuff is in the forest plan for the Chattahoochee National Forest or San Juan National Forest. You can find it all online on their websites. And that's a good thing, right? You go to the Chattahoochee National Forest, and up in the search bar, up in the top right-hand corner of their website, you just type in geocaching and hit enter. You're going to find the rules for geocaching within the Chattahoochee National Forest. The same thing for, the Wind River Bighorn Basin District Office in Wyoming. If you go there to the BLM there and you search for geocaching on their website, it will pop up the rules that they have for it. And it tells you that they can't be within so far of Native American historical, they can't be within and there are blank spots on the map that you're not allowed to have because they're culturally sensitive for various reasons, right? They have pictographs there. There are dinosaur fossils that were found there. There are, this. So they outline all that stuff in their land use policy. Most of it you can find on their website. But if you can't find it on their website, and you don't know who to talk to, I will tell you exactly who you need to talk to in every single office for any of these public land management agencies. You call the office for the governing body that covers the area that you want to talk, that you're looking at, right? The Gunnison National Forest, and you call them and they answer the phone. Gunnison National Forest, this is so and so. How can I help you? And you tell them, I'd like to speak to your outdoor recreation planner, please.
Right. That's cool. Yeah.
The outdoor recreation planner is the person who dictates what gets done recreationally.
That's who you need to talk to.
And sure. That is who you need to talk to, regardless of whether it's the BOR, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Forest Service, the state forestry people, whatever public land management agency you're looking for. They almost always, unless the position is vacant, they have a outdoor recreation planner who their entire job is to manage the recreational use in the lot of land that they cover. And that's the person that you need to talk to. And if you get nothing else out of the rest of this, that's the person to call when you have questions. They're the person who can answer it. And when they sit there and tell you, no, that's not allowed, and you say, hey, I'd like to see a copy of that policy, that's the person who's going to email it to you.
Cool.
Or email you a link to it, because 9 times out of 10, it's online somewhere. You just don't know how to find it.
Right. Yeah, I was looking through the Utah, just out of curiosity, was looking through the wikis, and I guess they're a good guide. I mean, they're not gospel, but at least it gets you sort of a general idea. Yeah. And they're in the show notes, but they have sort of regional geocaching policies. I think they're fairly up to date as far as from a geocaching.com perspective, but
because the wikis are written by the reviewers for those areas.
For those areas. So I found it interesting looking, national parks are pretty much off limits for the most part, but they do say that you can check with a park manager and maybe, and they say if you do get permission, you have to then have them email directly to the reviewer, because they have to really, like, they're not going to take your word for it. Sorry, you're going to have to get. But
I've had to do that. I've had to submit a copy on a letterhead with the guy's signature on it and a phone number to get a cache placed. There is a traditional cache in Yellowstone National Park, so
interesting.
It can be done. It takes some work, and you've got to be willing to do the legwork. But and in that, like, the park superintendent has to be on board with it also. And whatnot, right? And understand some of this stuff. So know that national parks are sensitive areas, and they are national parks for a reason. We don't want people just, hightailing it across country, for a pill bottle at the bottom of a pine tree.
Right. Don't do like Forrest Fenn and just willy-nilly hide something somewhere, and then all these people go out and try to find it and damage property. Or the photo I used for tonight's show was the monolith that whoever put a monolith out in the middle of nowhere. Right when that happened, I sent Charles a note and I go, dude, you see what somebody did? They stuck a monolith in the middle of the desert, or not, it was kind of the mountains, I guess. And it's like, what the heck are they doing?
Yeah, it was outside of Moab, Utah. That thing disappeared as soon as it hit the internet, and people realized, because no lie, it was out there for a hot minute. Let's not lie about this. Somebody went out there and put it and didn't say anything.
Right.
Somebody stumbled upon it and then was like, hey, this. It hit the internet and it blew up.
Oh, people are driving out there and leaving trash. Oh, gosh.
Within probably, because when you look at Google for the coordinates for it, you can see it, and you can see its shadow out there south of Moab, Utah.
Yeah.
So it had been there long enough for the Google satellites to update all the maps. So it had been out there for a while, but it didn't once people realized exactly where it was.
Yeah.
The Red Rock 4-wheelers from Moab, Utah went and picked it up. They're like, no, the BLM said it wasn't allowed. No, gone. And they went out there and used a winch to pull it over, put it in the back of somebody's Jeep and drove back into town. It didn't last, probably 48 hours once they realized exactly where it was at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So really important that we as Houston, Texas Dave says, I mean, this really applies everywhere, is to always get permission, or at least you need to know ahead of time what the location. It's a bigger deal on each state has a different sort of way of going at it, but still you need to know before you go put a cache out somewhere. I mean, don't give geocaching a bad name by just, oh, well, I thought this was okay. Really? You can't assume that it's okay just because you saw, oh, somebody else did it. Well, their cache may not be any good either. So don't follow what they did.
And, really the preparation you take to hide a cache in the city you should be doing permission and everything else, but you have to multiply that when you're taking it out to places that are dangerous, like deserts, and because kids could go to these too, right? So deserts and mountains and stuff. Mm-hmm. As much as that's more dangerous than the city, you also need to do that much more prep work. Know what kind of container, make sure you have permission, because you don't need to be destroying those natural areas like that either. And you bring people to them, and there may be a reason why you shouldn't be there that you wouldn't know without the research. You have to just kind of multiply that.
Yeah. So we're getting kind of toward the end. I do want to sort of the last topic, I guess, and as we start to wrap up, and that is the one that fascinates me is one of yours, Charles, which is the correct me on the name, but basically it's if you do all the counties in Colorado, it's sort of the finishers cache.
So it's a challenge cache. It's the new Colorado County Challenge Cache.
Gotcha.
Is the name of it.
Right. So there's some things to know. Well, what are some things that people need to know when they want to hide something like that? What are some things that you went through in your checklist of things to do to make this, really cool hide? I mean, I know you went through and you're like, okay, placement. Well, what are some things that you went through and sort of planned for? And that kind of might translate for others into, if let's say they do live in Idaho or some of the other states, Washington, there's plenty of states out in the West. Well, there's places out east, the Appalachian Mountains. I mean, there's plenty of mountains in different parts of the U.S. And of course, we have international listeners too. So what are some things that you kind of, as you think through it now, what are some things that you went through to sort of prepare that particular cache?
So I talked to the National Forest Service that manages that area and said, hey, this is what I'd like to do. This is where I want to put it. This is what the container is going to be. It's it's a large ammo can. And first got permission to, before I ever looked at anything else, said, this is where I want to put it. And they blessed off on it.
Right. Gotcha.
I happen to work in the office, the Forest Service and the BLM office there were co-located. So I just got to walk down the hall and talk to the outdoor rec planner for the Forest Service and told them, hey, this is what I want to do. This is where it's going to be. They said, fine. So once the permission was granted, then I had to get there. That cache is located on top of a 13,500 foot mountain.
Right.
And it is in a very, very remote part of Colorado. to get there requires you to either have a Jeep, a UTV, or a motorcycle, an off-road motorcycle, a dirty bike. To get from the highway, the 11 and a half miles one way from the highway, or if you go the other way, it's like 14 miles of pretty extreme off-road driving to get to the parking spot. And then from the parking spot,
nice.
it is a 500-foot elevation gain over a half a mile hike to get there, right? So it's a pretty, it actually is like 500 feet in the first 300 feet.
Dang.
And then it's pretty level for the majority of that walk.
Christmas break, Cache? Can I go up there in Christmas and do that?
I'm not going to tell you that you can't get it at Christmas time. I'm going to tell you that it's probably going to be covered in feet of snow.
Snowshoes required.
Snowshoes.
You need a shovel.
Definitely.
Shovel.
Yeah, you'll need a shovel. And that cache is usually only accessible like the end of June to like the beginning of October.
No food or drinks in caches.
That's right. You should know that, Dave.
You bring your own beer. Bring your own beer to that one.
But so once I got up there with this ammo can, I then had to figure out a place to hide it. There's like that other photo of a geocache that I showed. There's no trees to anchor this to. And so what I did was there's a pretty big sized boulder, and I had a shovel and some other an ice pick and a crowbar with me. So I crowbarred and shoveled and moved some rocks and broke a piece of this rock out and pulled it out that just perfectly that ammo can slides into. And so then I slide the ammo can in there, and then I lean a rock up in front of it so you can't, right? So now my hint is it's under a rock.
Right.
It's under a big rock. But so there were a couple of things that I took into consideration. It's up on top of a mountain. It does rain there. So I wanted to put it in a place where it's not going to wash away in a heavy rainstorm. It's windy up there, so it needs to be protected from wind and rain. And then it needs to be protected from snow, avalanches.
Yeah.
It needs to be able to withstand water runoff from springtime melt. So
it isn't like you can sort of do like some of my caches in town. I can, there's one in town I can drive by and see it. So you got to prepare like that cache you're talking about. You aren't just driving by and checking on it.
No, you're a half mile hike on a good day from the parking spot. At least from the parking coordinates that I give you. You can park wherever you want.
Yeah.
I gave you the absolute closest you could park to it. But you're going to need a 4-wheel drive vehicle. You'll need a UTV, ATV, motorcycle, whatnot. And then I warn you, right? Like if you're coming and you live in Nebraska, like this is a half mile hike and 500 feet of elevation gain. Yeah. And that really wouldn't be too bad, except the parking spot's at 13,000 feet.
Right. Yeah. You got to remember that.
And so in that, right, know that when you leave the highway at 8,000 feet and you get to the parking coordinates at 13,000 feet, you still have a walk to get there. Take your time, do it slow, but there's altitude sickness that you have to take into consideration. Dehydration, because you may suck down a lot more water than you expect. The places there in town do sell flavored oxygen in a little bottle.
They do.
With a face mask on it, so you can stick it up there and get you a shot of pure O2.
Yeah.
No
so joke.
There are things to consider, right? Obviously, geocaches are supposed to be placed so that they can be found year round. And by all means, if you want to go up there in December or January and find it, it's probably going to be 10 or 12 feet of snow on top of it easily.
Dang.
Because the parking spot, when they clean it off in June, still has 8 or 10 feet of snow on it.
Oh my gosh.
So you can get there, you know, and the hard part about it is if it's still covered in snow is you're not exactly sure where to dig. You got an idea based off of GPS coordinates, but the hint really doesn't help you either, because the hint is designed for, you know, for no snow. Now, I have gone up there every year since I've hidden it, and I have performed owner maintenance, and that is the other side to being able to hide a geocache in these areas. So you have to be able to do maintenance on it. So I travel back to Colorado every year. I drive up there and park, and I walk my happy hiney out there to where I have this cache hidden. And in that, every year for cache maintenance, I take a picture of the ammo can, I take a picture of the rock, I take a picture of all of the signatures in the logbook, and if your name's not in it, look, it's a 5-5 cache. I'm deleting your log. If your name's not in the book, got to go.
Got to go.
So just know that, right? If you're gonna hide one in either a desert area or up in the mountains, that you may need to do cache maintenance more often than you feel like you should have to.
Right.
Or you need to be able to say, hey, look, this cache for the most part is not going to be accessible from October to June.
Yeah.
It's going to be a summertime, a short 3-4 month window to get to it. You know, and in those 3 to 4 months, you as the cache owner need to go out and check on your cache so that you don't have somebody, you know, like I had some cachers that came down from up north. They came down from Minnesota, rented a Jeep for a day, which was a $300 plus investment for them.
Right.
They drove up the mountain. Now, I do have more than one cache up there at the top, so I try to make it worth your investment and time to get up the mountain.
Gotcha.
And they found both of my caches that were up there. But, you know, if you don't own the special equipment needed to get there and you have to rent it, right? I don't want you to invest that money in a trip to go find my cache and my cache not be there. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
that's important.
You know, so I have placed mine in a place where it should survive all weather conditions, right? It should be there year after year, unless we have a huge avalanche that moves the top end of that mountain.
Yeah.
And the boulders that are up there on top of it, it's underneath a boulder that's, you know, the size of a house.
Right.
So it's going to have to be pretty significant to move the rock that it's under. Hey, weirder things have happened. Those mountains used to not be there. You go far enough back in
it's true. So someday it might change.
So, but you know, but that's one of the things as a cache owner, you need to be able to get up there and perform maintenance, especially if somebody logs a DNF on it. Right? Hey, we got out here and you're like, no, they shouldn't have logged a DNF. There's no reason. You know, I've got multiple caches above 12,000 feet, and I've got multiple caches out in the desert. You know, but that goes into special equipment required. Like I tell you on the cache page, you're going to need this. Otherwise, not saying that you can't walk to it, but it is it is going to be a 12 to 14 mile hike from 8,000 feet at the highway to 13,500 feet at the top.
Right.
If you can walk that, I'm giving it even if you can walk.
Yeah.
It's still a terrain 5, in my opinion, if you're hiking that.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, because not everybody.
You really do need 4-wheel drive to go to it. So, all right. Yeah. Well, cool. So let's final thoughts, guys. My final thoughts is great job. I love hearing about these. I want to try to do more caches, and plan to do some. I'm going to head kind of your direction next May. If not before, Charles, I'm going to head your way to Arizona for the Geo Woodstock 20.
It's in Flagstaff. That's it's like a 4-hour drive from my front door.
Right. A little further for me, but
live in Flagstaff when I was a little kid.
Did you really? Wow. Yeah. I've been to Flagstaff. Love it. I was before I was geocaching, but I encourage everybody to put Geo Woodstock on their schedule. We'll talk more about Geo Woodstock when it gets a little closer, but great chance to go to Arizona and do some caches in that area. I'm gonna go through New Mexico and get to Arizona. But anyway, so I guess Jesse, you want to go next? What are some of your final thoughts tonight?
I think really the really short version. We've already talked about everything, but just know what you're getting into. If you're hiding or finding caches in a terrain that's different than your own or an extreme terrain, even if you think you're used to it,
right?
Just know what you're getting into. It's different than finding them under a park bench.
Very good. Charles, thanks for being on tonight.
Kind of the same considerations go into both, even though they're completely different terrains, mountains and deserts. The same considerations need to go into stuff before you hide a cache there, right? Take weather environment, year-round weather cycles. Is your container appropriate? There are a lot of things that go into this, and get there. Find a bunch of geocaches, get some time under your belt there, and kind of learn what's what. What containers work, what containers don't, before you just go out and throw a new cache out there that, for whatever reason be it gets cold up in the mountains or it gets hot in the desert and your containers become brittle. Put some work into it and make sure that it is a cache that if you went out to go find it, you would want to find.
Absolutely.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thanks. And we'll see you all next week. Be interesting. We're going to talk about the caches across America. So that's kind of an interesting show because there's basically one in every state. And I think they're all still up and running. So anyway, should be interesting. We're going to talk to Lori Bird. She's a pilot. That's why she goes by Lori Bird. And she works on the caches across America. So looking forward to that show. And everybody have a good week. We'll see y'all next time. Good night, everybody.
May your finds be many and your DNFs be few. May the terrain and difficulty both be less than 2. And whatever it is you're looking for, may it find its way to you. And may we all meet again.
Folks, we hope you've enjoyed the show tonight. Please email us your comments at geocachetalk@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, or Spotify, as well as at the Geocache Talk website. Don't forget to click that subscribe button below and ring that bell notification so that you can see and hear the show on a weekly basis. And tell your friends about the show. Get them involved with us in the chat room. And until next week, don't just talk about geocaching, go geocaching.